Next up, we have our Development Services Director, Jake Ekholm, reporting out on Brownfield and infill housing presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Let's see if I can set up here. One moment. Okay. All right. So,
Yes.
sure. At a previous meeting, two commissioners who had been more recently elected to the board since we had started our larger infill housing programs had asked for us to put together just a brief presentation as to how that program works, specifically as regards to the Brownfield TIF. I think that gets referenced all the time in our infill housing, and with some of our investment forays into neighborhoods with lower price points for our new construction homes. So we're seeing larger gaps between construction costs and sale prices. I think a couple commissioners were concerned by those price differentials. Want to make sure that they're safeguarding public trust and public funds. So we put together a short presentation just to kind of walk through our wider infill housing program and how it pertains to Brownfield and kind of what that means. So with that, I'll kind of quickly run through this presentation and then take any questions from the commission as well. And I know Commissioner St. Clair was specifically one of the folks who had asked for this, so I'll make sure that I send her a separate email as well. So the City of Muskegon's infill housing program and Brownfield TIF. So really since like 2014, 2015, the City of Muskegon has been a leader in West Michigan locally when it comes to municipal government as far as infill housing. So as everyone knows, we've seen years of disinvestment in our residential neighborhoods, which is very typical of large industrialized Midwestern communities. So we look a lot like a lot of other communities in the Midwest. So the big question mark has always been, okay, can you create desirability in your neighborhoods where people, if we put the houses back, would people do it? The challenge has always become, due to all kinds of institutional barriers to profitability to building in urban context areas, private development could never really make the numbers work. They couldn't get a return on those houses. It was much easier to buy previously agricultural land in townships, especially here in Michigan, and build new subdivisions at higher price points for better returns. So, most of the parcels and the houses that we've built, we kind of benefit twice, because we're replacing tax base that was formerly there, and we're removing blight. The strong majority of these have also been placed into our what we call our Brownfield Plan Amendment. So here in Muskegon, we have an older version of the Brownfield Public Act 381's Brownfield Act, which is a citywide brownfield plan, which is somewhat unusual, and we're kind of grandfathered into it, which is a good thing, so we don't want to ever change it. So that allows us to accept writ large amendments to that brownfield plan, and the city has a unique opportunity, and since 2015 we've had our own plan amendment where we actually work with our appointed brownfield board to capture some of the tax increment revenue that we generate from our houses we build ourselves. So, and you'll see on slide 2 there, that's actually an example of one of our neighborhoods. So you can see everything in blue or red is a vacant lot. Everything in dark blue is city-owned and buildable. Everything in light blue is city-owned and non-buildable. Everything in darker red is county land bank owned and buildable, and everything in lighter red is county land bank owned and not buildable for one reason or another. But I always enjoy those maps. They really put it into vivid context. So, going to slide 3, really briefly explaining Brownfield. So everybody hears Brownfield and they think like former industrial, EPA, polluted, Superfund site, and that's fair. So in 2002, the federal government instituted the Brownfield Act, which really was an EPA-initiated piece of legislation replacing the former Superfund legislation from the 70s and 80s that kind of recodified and updated some of the EPA's policies on industrial cleanup, and that's called the Brownfield Act. So Brownfield really has two definitions. That's the environmental definition that the feds use, and that they pass money down through that act every year to state environmental agencies, which then dole that money out for environmental cleanup projects. We've been the beneficiary of a lot of those different types of projects. Harbor 31, Shaw Walker, I believe there's been several others, Amico, I can keep going. A lot of what we've benefited from those funds from DEQ, now Eagle. But from an urban planning context, brownfield can really be defined as any property that is vacant, polluted, blighted, or functionally obsolete. So all of our vacant city lots apply under that definition. In the state of Michigan, Public Act 381 is the legislation that defines those for us and then enables certain privileges for cities and private developers to benefit from a tax incentive to redevelop those types of properties. Again, contaminated, blighted, historic, or functionally obsolete. We mostly use functionally obsolete and blighted in our plan amendments is what we most often see. The Act empowers state agencies and then more importantly local governments to use tools for redevelopment, primarily brownfield TIF or tax increment financing. So on this slide, I'll just posted a brief example of our recent infill houses. This one is one of the ARP infill houses, American Rescue Plan Act infill houses, on a previously vacant lot. So as to tax increment financing, I think that expression, or TIF gets thrown around a lot too, but for those that don't work in it every day, it's kind of hard to get your head around it sometimes. And so I remember being like a 24-year-old new city manager and going to my first EDA meeting and hearing TIF over and over and over. And I knew from like my classes what it was, but I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm not hearing that right. And so it took a lot of time to really contextualize it. So tax increment financing districts allow for municipalities or appointed boards of municipalities to withhold and retain tax money that we collect for other taxing jurisdictions. So our treasurer collects a tax bill, and that tax bill gets split up to the county, to us, to the college, to the library, to the schools. And so some of those we get to retain until we pay for certain items, or as long as we implement programming for certain items and projects. In Michigan, entities such as cities in the Brownfield Act can capture what they call cost of sale. And so that's been an important interpretation of the PA 381 that's been relatively recent. So that's a clear distinction between us and private developers. So private developers can't do exactly what we're doing with this infill housing because they can't recover that cost of sale. So what we mean by that is any losses against construction. So if I build a house for $200 and I sell it for $175, I can recover that $25,000 by withholding the taxes from the county, other taxing jurisdictions, as well as the city. The Brownfield Authority here retains those until we pay ourselves back. That is unique to municipalities and public agencies in the Brownfield Act in Michigan. That's very unusual. It's not like that in every state. That means we can sell infill housing units at lower rates to be more affordable for our residents, or to counterbalance the fact that the private market will not pay a profitable margin that the private sector will accept, and pay ourselves back over time. So really quickly, I put together just a brief scenario to kind of show how this works. So say there's 10 vacant lots in our whole plan amendment. In reality, there are hundreds of vacant lots in our plan amendment, but for the sake of this, we're going to say there's 10. 10 of them are all constructed. They're constructed at $100,000 each, and then we pay 10% in closing costs and fees. So we've put $1.1 million into our brownfield investment for 10 houses. 5 of those houses sell for $100,000. So for all 5 of them, we lost $50,000 when you add in sale and expenses. 5 more are maybe in an area with more blight. They're in an area where there's been fewer comps. They're in an area with smaller houses or lower income population buyers. They sell for $80,000. And so you can see the difference racks up pretty quickly. Even though there's only a $20,000 sale difference, you can see how quickly that adds up. So we lose $150,000 with our closing costs. So the total loss in our brownfield plan there, after all sales and fees, is $200,000. So to the next slide, the total taxable value we created is very important because that's what's going to generate all that new TIF revenue for us over time. So if we look at the market value divided by 2 as a rule of thumb to calculate our taxable value, we've created $450,000 in new taxable value that our treasurer is collecting from those new homeowners every year. And the annual brownfield TIF capture from new value here in the city of Muskegon is approximately 39 mils, plus minus point something, times 450, which is your millage rate divided by your taxable value. So we're collecting $17,550 per year on those 10 houses every year.
Just want to clarify for our purposes as well as anyone at home watching that that's 39 mills of not every. Can you explain all the 39
Sure.
mills? It's not just it's not the city of Muskegon's
Yeah.
millage. Our millage rate is not 39 mills.
Yep.
So could you please explain? The
Yeah,
39
yep.
mills?
I was going to speak to that over our taxable
were you?
value. Yeah,
Oh,
taxable
jumping
value
the gun.
inflation.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Totally okay. I can speak on it right now. So that 39 mills. So the total millage burden for the city of Muskegon on a property is just around 60 mills, plus minus. And so the 39 mills represented here are not new taxes that this individual or this homeowner is paying. We're keeping a portion of their taxes that would have otherwise gone elsewhere. So 13 point some odd mills is ours, including operating and sanitation. 7 plus minus is the county, and then you've got special millages such as the libraries, the community college millage. So when you add them all up for local only tax capture, which is what we're focusing on for today, that comes to approximately 39 mills in a local only brownfield, which is for, just so everybody understands, that's $39 for every $1,000 of taxable value on your house. So, so 39 mills times $450 created by our $450,000 in new taxable value is $17,550 that the city of Muskegon is collecting and retaining through the brownfield every year. We calculate our inflation of our taxable value averaged at 2% a year, and assuming no millage changes happen, that means over the next 10 years, those new houses are going to generate in the brownfield $196,000 in taxable value, which is almost exactly what we lost when we built them. In year 11, you finalize your tax capture, and the plan amendment is technically over. Like, so the TIF table is over. That means we've paid ourselves back, and what happens then is our treasurer is then responsible for removing that brownfield designation, that special tax roll designation, and then starting to pay out as we do for all the other houses. So they're removed from the brownfield plan once they're repaid, which means the county starts getting money for them, the college starts getting money for them. So it's a win-win for everybody in the long run, because in the short term, there would have been no house there otherwise. So long story short, TIF means that we collect extra money for specific reasons as the city, and really through the Brownfield board on behalf of the city, until such time as we're paid back for losses, which allows us to generate profit over time on taxable value and provide more public services after we repay those losses.
On our home infill TIF program, are we continuing to capture? Typically, we do an extra 5 years. If it gets paid off, we'll capture an additional 5 years that will then go into our local brownfield revolving fund.
Yeah.
Are we doing that on this program, or is it just stops once we get
I
paid back?
believe on the citywide brownfield, we do collect the extra 5 years. Yep, we rewrote that into a plan amendment in recent years. Yep.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't believe it was written that way originally, and then when we added lots later, I believe we put that in there. So yep. So what that allows us to do is gives the brownfield through Public Act 381 gives the brownfield dollars that they can use as a revolving fund for economic development projects, additional infill housing development, affordable housing developments, things of that nature. Those are all specifically defined in PA 381. So the nice thing in Michigan about brownfield is we have, and from an urban planning context, is we have a lot more local control than a lot of other states. A lot of other states don't necessarily take an urban planning context to brownfield programming. They really look at it specifically, directing those federal dollars for environmental remediation. They don't have the options for redevelopment on lots if they're not a federally defined EPA brownfield. And so we have a lot of latitude as compared with some other states. On this last slide 8, I just showed you some concepts in existing builds: Midtown Square Phase 1, the townhomes in Midtown Square Phase 2, and then a rendering of the house currently under construction for Mr. Briggs's ARP infill program. So that one will be completed in mid-spring, and already has a buyer, I believe, that you guys have already approved. That's a really quick overview, but I think it gives you a good idea. So long story short, the thing to take away is that, we are probably the only entity, cities and villages and townships in Michigan are probably the only entity that can sell homes in the most difficult environment, accept those losses, and then as long as the math works where you'll get your money back within 30 years, which is the maximum on a brownfield, you can provide that benefit to your citizens, because the private market often won't. Because again, it's just more profitable to go build in new construction areas like subdivisions and more suburban communities. So with that, I would entertain any questions on the brownfield program.
Excellent. Thank you, Director Ekholm. Commissioners. Questions? Commissioner Gorman.
This is a beautiful PowerPoint to start visually. Thank you. I just wondered if there could be a possibility that you could like record yourself in a video going through this PowerPoint that could go on the website. So when people have
Thank you.
Seriously, I think it's a great educational piece. It would be very helpful, I know, for me to refer people to that don't understand, because unless you know, you don't know, and it's a lot to explain. But I think it'd be a great resource.
We feel like this was a good
I
take.
was just saying, this is
Like,
a beautiful
yes.
PowerPoint.
I can
so-
read it again, but like, we can probably clip this video and put it on
Yeah.
the website.
Oh,